welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Talked Before. This time, we're digging deep into, I wouldn't say the dark age, but the kind of a dark zone, one that maybe a lot of you don't know about, Star Trek Phase 2. What was going to happen between the end of the animated series, or the original series and the animated series, and what was going to be the next iteration. But it never happened. Or did it? Star Trek Phase 2, we dig deep. Jimmy-Jerome, all the details right here. It's all been talked before. We got a YouTube channel. Do you know that? Some of you might even be listening to us on the YouTube channel for all I know, and maybe are. But you can check out all the other stuff. You know, we love the written word. We love audio podcasts, but there are other mediums out there. That's why we launched this YouTube channel. See behind the scenes stuff from It's All Been Done Radio Hour, humorous weekly series, thank you to our fans, discussions on books, network peeps, just goof around, and more. You can also listen to some of our podcasts, like I was just mentioned, this one right here. Go to YouTube and search It's All Been Done Presents. Check out IABDpresents.com for a direct link. And please support all our programming at patreon.com/IABD. One of our newest things, I don't think it's on the YouTube channel yet, but Jim's Daily by Jerome Wetzel, yeah. This is a Facebook thing. Every day, network creator Jerome Wetzel wonders things. Funny things. Inspirational things. Weird things. Most of them crap. But every once in a while, once a day, he thinks he has the thought someone else might appreciate. More often than not, he's wrong. But that hasn't stopped him from launching Jim's Daily by Jerome Wetzel on Facebook. Every day, you'll get one post only from Jerome. Like and subscribe. See what he's thinking about next. I will say it's a fun little treat. So I suggest you like and subscribe. You're on Facebook anyway. Unless you've given up the whole social media thing, this is something you can like and enjoy every day. Just like It's All Been Talked Before. This time we're talking Star Trek Phase 2. It's All Been Talked Before.
Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Trekked Before. Skeleton Crew's here.
This is Steven.
Jimmy-Jerome. We are here for the third episode of our mini-season.
Yeah.
So the third episode, Star Trek Phase 2. A story a lot of people don't know. It's the story of the Lost television series. We're going to get into it. But I wanted to say up front, it's also kind of the story of the motion picture. Mm-hmm. And we're not going to do pre-episodes leading up to production on any of the other films. But this one has a really unique story.
Yeah.
So you were alive in the 70s.
Yeah. And I know we've been talking about this here and there on the way through the original series and animated and all that. I remember tiny bits and pieces, but just doing some reading, prior to today, it was like, wow, there was so much more to this. I mean, it was...
Oh, it's huge.
Yeah. I probably was more familiar with like Earth 2 and some of the other things Roddenberry's up to. In my mind at the time, and again, I was 8 or 9 or whatever, even though that's when I was like, oh, I'm getting really into movie stuff and I'm reading all this movie stuff. But even in that, and then when I got into Star Trek, by the time I got really into Star Trek, it was like, oh, the motion picture opens in like 6 months or whatever. So I kind of missed out on all that stuff before then and all just jumped in and went forward. Yeah.
Well, these are the days before Facebook and Twitter and stuff.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, as we record this, Discovery ended its second season last night.
Yeah.
And they already announced. My primary source in talking about Star Trek Phase 2 is this book I bought a long time ago called Star Trek Phase 2: The Lost Series. I'm going to reference it a whole bunch while we talk. It's by Judith and Garfield Reeve-Stevens, who co-wrote all of Shatner's Star Trek novels with him.
Oh, wow.
They also wrote a bunch of Star Trek novels on their own.
Okay.
And they were... this is from memory, so I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure they were the primary writers of the last season of Enterprise. Oh. Enterprise was fled, having trouble.
Yeah.
So they're like, hey, we know this husband-wife team are great. Let's bring them in. They're going to finish it. And I watched the final season. It was amazing. Mm-hmm. I have not watched all of Enterprise. We'll get to that. I think we should start leading up what led up to Phase 2. So in the early 1970s, TV ratings switched from total numbers of viewers to demos. They'd always been the totals.
Yep.
We're still using demos today. That's the key. Yeah. And what they quickly discovered was Star Trek was killing in the demos and would have never been canceled had they been measuring by that measure. That combined with the first Star Trek convention in New York City where they expected 600 and 3,000 showed up. NBC's representatives were there at the convention, immediately left because they didn't want to get questioned about what happened. But then they approached Paramount about resurrecting a movie, and Gene Roddenberry, about let's do a movie or a TV show or something because clearly... We made a mistake.
Yeah.
Let's revisit. There were a whole bunch of ideas floating around. The animated series was floated, and it was cheap, easy to get into production. So while they're still debating, do we want live action or movie, they're like, let's go ahead and do animated 2. It was never going to be like a replacement.
You're right.
It was just like, this will get it, let's put something on there quick. We want to do something quick,
Makes
and it's
sense.
not expensive. And Roddenberry later said that if he was sure the other deals would have gone through, he would have never approved the animated series.
I can see that.
But since he wasn't sure and he thought that could be his only chance, even though there were all these talks, the talks don't always go away. Anywhere.
Right.
By 1975, the animated series was canceled, but Paramount was still interested in a movie. So Gene Roddenberry wrote a script called The God Thing. Admiral Kirk reassembles the crew who had been scattered to confront a force threatening the Earth that may or may not be God. He really wanted to make it biblical, and Paramount was like, we're not touching religion. They had greenlit it with a production date for 1976 and a budget of $5 million, but that was before the script was written.
Wow.
And then Gene delivered this biblical script, and they're like, oh, no, we want something else. So they actually had a production date and a budget. Huh. But I like the crew had been promoted and taken on other assignments, which is not something that existed in any of these other concepts.
Yeah. I mean, other than, I guess it was the first fan service, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, getting all those guys. I mean,
well, and we'll get into together, but why scatter them then?
That's a fair point.
I mean, it reminds me a little bit of like the beginning of Star Trek 3, where they are kind of a little bit scattered and not serving together and have to get themselves back together. But this seemed more elaborate and more like Kirk's like, the only people that can help me are this crew. Following that, Paramount didn't immediately order another script. They still were interested, but Gene's like, well, I'm not going to wait for them to order anything. I'm just going to start writing something. But knowing that maybe he should get some help, he started working with John Pavel, who would eventually write the film Total Recall.
Oh, wow.
And John was essential through Phase 2 and into the motion picture. So this... I probably won't talk a lot about him, but the book talks a lot about John. He was working with Roddenberry. And in their first concept, Scotty introduces future tech to 1937 Earth. Humans become enslaved by a central computer, and Starfleet and the Federation never existed. So Kirk and crew go back in time to find Scotty and stop him screwing up history. Yeah, I mean, I guess that story makes more sense to me for Simon Pegg's version of Scotty than Jimmy Doohan's version of Scotty.
Yeah, I think you're right. You never saw that part of Scotty, that he'd be the...
I mean, I want more Scotty too,
but...
it's
a different Scotty.
I grew up with the films, so going back to the original series, it was very weird to suddenly see Scotty not fat. I mean, the Scotty from you will always be the film Scotty, not the television Scotty. But anyway, then Paramount paid for 2 more Star Trek movie scripts because they were still wanting to get it going.
Sure.
So they got one by John D.F. Black, who wrote about the Enterprise trying to save the universe from a black hole. Mm-hmm. Paramount said, that script's not big enough.
Black holes were big, including the movie The Black Hole came out.
Well, they're big again right now since we just got our first photo of the black hole.
Yeah.
But Paramount said, that's not exciting enough, which to me, I'm like, really? Because visually, on the big screen, a starship in a black hole, that would be cool. At the same time, Robert Silverberg wrote a script that had the Enterprise battling with aliens over the ruins of an ancient advanced civilization.
Okay.
Which was kind of a Next Generation episode, sort of.
Isn't that Jihad? Isn't that the animated episode?
Yeah, kind of. But
was it Jihad
or
the slaver weapon?
The slaver weapon. Yeah. Harlan Ellison also came in and pitched the Enterprise following reptilian aliens back in time who were trying to prevent humans from becoming the dominant life on Earth.
Okay.
So kind of like First Contact, except instead of Borg, it was like, let's let dinosaurs be smart.
Harlan Ellison makes me interested.
Yeah, but that was just a pitch. They didn't buy it. Paramount this time also called in Ray Bradbury and Theodore Sturgeon, who were picking their brains. Yeah. So lot of stuff.
It struck me just reading about this, and we've talked about it a lot, and all the animated and everything, how much the writers are so important to, and I think I think that's part of what makes Star Trek great, how much they use a lot of different writers and excellent sci-fi writers and people with different ideas, like your David Geralds and those kind of guys. But
so anyway, September 1976, we also get the fan letter writing campaign to get NASA to name its first shuttle the Enterprise. Yeah. So then Paramount's like, okay, we've got to do something. We greenlit Gene's first script without seeing it. That was a mistake. We've picked all these brains. Let's get something else going. So then they went ahead and greenlit a second film, not the first film having never been made, called Star Trek Planet of the Titans. That was probably the most developed film that didn't get made. Okay. The concept enterprises we were looking at in the book, with the triangular shape, are from Planet of the Titans. They actually hired director, they hired production crew. Ralph McQuarrie, who did Star Wars special effects, was hired to redesign the Enterprise to look more like a Star Destroyer, hence the triangular shape. Okay. So, it basically looked like the Enterprise had a baby with a Star Destroyer.
All of Ralph McQuarrie's paintings for Star Wars, and I'd love to take a look at these too. Much as I love Star Wars, Ralph McQuarrie's paintings for Star Wars, the development stuff, are even better than what... Yeah, and of course, I mean, it's a lot easier. I shouldn't say it's easier, but... Yeah, it's easier to draw something and then, than to film it or whatever.
Sure.
But, yeah, they were amazing.
So then, as they were doing Planet of the Titans, they had to write it without Kirk. Because Shatner was in negotiations and holding out for more money.
Oh, yep.
And so the original Planet of the Titans draft was without Kirk, and then they reached a deal with Shatner, and they had to add Kirk into the story. But basically, the concept of Planet of the Titans was Starfleet and Klingons would compete for a planet thought to be home of the ancient race called the Titans, which was similar to the other concept we mentioned. The species that eradicated the Titans attacked, and the Enterprise has to go back in time and introduce fire to Earth. And then they realized that the crew of the Enterprise are the Titans of legend. Paramount didn't really like that. Still were meandering. But then 1977 was important because Star Wars came out. Huge success.
Yep.
And believe it or not, people at Paramount were like, well, sci-fi fans have their movie now. They probably don't want a second one.
Right, yeah.
They said that.
I have no doubt. I have no doubt.
Now we can't do a movie.
I mean, we're still there now. It's like, well, we can only have one female superhero movie.
Right. If Captain Marvel doesn't work, that just means people don't want to see women.
Yep. Yeah.
So they were, at this time, like, well, Star Wars was great, but maybe we should abandon our projects because they can only want one. And then Close Encounters of the Third Kind came out the same year. And then that was also a huge hit. And they're like, wait, 2 sci-fi movies were big? Well, maybe we could do one then. So there was a lot of back and forth there.
Wow.
And Paramount, at that time, was also really tired of, this is kind of a side story, but it's relevant. They were really tired of losing money making television for other networks. So apparently,
to me, this was the most mind-blowing part of this whole thing. I know it's not Star Trek. It is tangentially, but sorry.
No, apparently in this day and age, if you were a studio like Paramount that were licensing your shows to ABC, NBC, CBS, because those were the only 3 networks you could go to, you did not make money until the shows went to syndication.
Yeah.
Which means the show had to last for at least 65 episodes, like 2.5 seasons, 3 seasons. So Paramount's like, we can recapture this money. Let's launch our own network. We're going to call it the 4th network because there were only 3 at the time, really. We're going to start this network with a 2-hour Star Trek movie because we have this great franchise we need to use that will help us.
Yeah.
Then we're going to do new episodes, and we're going to make 30 original movies in the first year that we're not going to release in theaters that we're just going to this channel.
That's ambitious.
So the channel is going to be mainly movies. But then Star Trek. I mean, Star Trek is making a ton of money in syndication, so they wanted to capture that.
And I know I've talked about this. TV movies were a bigger deal back then, too. And there were a lot more. I mean, there were a lot more on the main
But they were
networks.
Events.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
if
it was the Friday night movie.
How are they going to be events?
Yeah, that's fair.
So the people heading this up were Barry Dillett and a familiar name, Michael Eisner.
Yeah.
Eisner... Yeah, this was pre-Disney days. But he's the one that oversaw it through, like, the 90s. And period.
And then I think he went to CAA. I don't know where he is now.
Okay.
Probably just somewhere on a beach counting his money.
Yeah. So Eisner this time was like, we need to make a Star Trek show for the new network.
Yeah.
Which, I'm like, cool. It's almost like, to me, reading that's almost like reading how Lucy figured into the original Star Trek story.
Yeah.
You're like, this huge person that you had no idea was connected. Anyway, Eisner talks to Gene. He's like, we need a series. Gene's like, well, what about God Thing? Because that was a great script. And they're like, we'll see. So they're like, well, let's get working on the series. Even if we let him do that, that'll be 1 episode. We're going to make other episodes. It'll be fine. So Matt Jeffries was asked back. He updated the Enterprise, which was determined to be refitted. Whether this was the motion picture or Phase 2, it was going to be the start of a second 5-year mission. The Enterprise was one of the rare ships that actually completed a 5-year mission they talked about in the Bible.
Oh, okay.
That most ships didn't make it through 5 years, especially not with their senior staff intact.
Yeah.
So the fact that they did, these crewmen were like heroes. They were great. We're going to celebrate them. In fact, pretty much all the characters got promotions.
Right.
If you look at the Bible, it's Lieutenant Commander Sulu, and you heard Lieutenant Chekhov, Commander Scotty, Dr. Chapel, no longer nurse, Yeoman Rand, still Yeoman Rand.
What?
She's in the Bible.
And that part surprised me, too. I didn't realize they thought about bringing her back. Yeah.
And what's interesting is if you look at the Bible, at the end of the list of main characters, it just says yeoman. And in that description, it says we're going to have a rotating group of beautiful young women, including Grace Lee Whitney as Janice Rand.
Okay. I did see that was one of the things was like Roddenberry was like, we got to have more women in more important positions.
Well, in the original Bible, they said a third of the crew was women. In the Phase 2 Bible, half of the crew is now women.
Yeah.
So 50-50. And they did add, we'll talk in a minute, they did add another female main character, but it was still... And it seems like they were going to beef up Chapel's role, but it was still mainly men. I mean, 3 main females, 4 if you count Rand, but she's part of a rotating group, versus like 8 main men. It's not quite equal.
Yeah.
Matt Jeffries was excited getting to redesign because apparently they had to go with whatever ATM said for their models. So everything had to be very angular in the 60s.
Oh, okay.
And they were no longer hampered by ATM models. They had all this new technology. So he got to the shuttles were all rounded and sleek instead of boxy like they had been.
Yeah.
But they did decide they were going to keep the same uniforms to save money because they still had them in storage.
Okay. I mean, they are still my favorite.
Yeah.
But some of that's definitely nostalgic.
They're great. They're great uniforms.
I mean, they're made out of sea algae.
Yes.
or algae.
So the movie that didn't happen, that they had signed them for, most of the actors had pay-or-play deals. So the fact that the movie was canceled, they all still got paid for that.
I did notice that, yeah.
Which is kind of cool. They were offered the same deal for the pilot. Basically, you get paid for 13 episodes whether we make it or not for Phase 2. So the fact that the motion picture got made, they did have to renegotiate, but they all made quite a bit of money in this period, these actors.
Good.
Nimoy was offered... They went to Nimoy and said, we know you've been publicly saying you don't like Star Trek, so why don't you do 2 of every 11 episodes we make? So just come back a few times a year, and we'll pay you for those. And Nimoy was offended, because he was like, why aren't you asking me back as a main character? It's more like, my impression is, I wouldn't accept it, but you should be asking for it. And he's like, well, I'm definitely not doing 2 of 11. So if you're looking at the Bible, they're very much like, Spock's going to be mentioned a lot, and he's going to be part of this. We may not see him, but we're still hoping we're going to get him to guest star a couple times a year. So they left that door wide open.
I guess those would be the event episodes or the special episodes.
But if they're doing it 4 times a year, again, it's not that special.
Yeah.
The rest of the crew, including Chekhov, who got left out of the animated series, they signed them all back.
Yep.
Which Chekhov was now also promoted to head of security, which is cool.
Okay.
Before we get into the new characters, I do want to talk about some stuff the Bible says about the old characters, because this had some interesting tidbits. It is notable that this is the official Bible they use. Kirk has most of a page. Zahn has over a page, so he's got more in the Bible.
He's a newer guy.
Deckard and Ilia both have about half a page, so they're new characters. McCoy gets a whole page, and then everybody else gets, Scotty gets 3 paragraphs, Sulu gets 2, you heard Chekhov, Chapel each get 1. And Janice and all of the yeomen get 1 total. Chapel, of course, like I said, she's been promoted, and McCoy's using her to do all the medical duties he doesn't enjoy. Anything he finds boring or irritating. So they did say she's a confidant of McCoy, so they were going to develop that relationship further. Chekhov, commanding the security division, and he would be responsible for the captain's health, so he'd mainly sounds like he'll be leading away missions a lot, or very involved. Sulu, it's really funny, he is a compulsive hobbyist. Which is a lot how we talked about. Yeah. Like, I guess that's actually there in black and white that they noticed. He always had all these hobbies.
All right, good recognition.
Also, a chatterbox. He has a dual personality where he's extra professional on the job, but a chatterbox off the job. Which I guess I could kind of see in the series a little bit. Headed
towards that.
Uhura, among everything else they say about her, says she can do impersonations at the drop of a communicator. I don't think we ever got to see that.
Nope. I don't think so.
So I'm disappointed about that. Scotty talks about how he loves reading technical manuals, but I think we already got that. Yeah. And how he seems like he owns the engine and he gets to tell off Kirk. McCoy, they talk about him being the oldest crewman and how that should play into it.
Okay.
They also said he's very protective of Zahn, but would never admit it publicly.
Huh.
So basically there's this new Vulcan crewman, which we're going to talk more about in a second. But they decided that McCoy would have the same banter with him he had with Spock, where he always insulted him. But if other people were giving Zahn a hard time, behind Zahn's back, he would defend Zahn.
So, like, I can make fun of my brother, but you can't make fun of my brother.
But, like, with senior staff. Because Zahn was going to be given a hard time by everybody. That's how they designed this character, because anybody that comes in to replace Spock is going to be given a hard time. But McCoy alone will be defending him behind his back, which I think would have been a really cool dynamic to see.
Yeah.
A different side of McCoy.
That's a good idea.
Zahn himself if you read the description, is basically Data as a Vulcan.
Oh yeah.
So he's a full-blooded. He's a full-blooded Vulcan. He's going to be the new science officer. I tell you. So they split Spock's position in two. First officer and science were two separate positions. Yeah. Which makes sense. Spock can do everything. Sure. So Zahn was a full-blooded Vulcan. In one version, he was listed as second cousin to Spock, but that's not in the official Bible. He acts young. At one point, they said that he was acting young and hard to contain enthusiasm, but where they landed on in the Bible was that he was not familiar with emotions at all because he didn't have the half-human side, didn't have the human mother Spock had. Sure. So he was going to, in a Data way, try to learn about emotions to better serve the crew to do a good job. Okay. But he wouldn't understand emotions, so like Data, he would be new to them and doing them wrongly, like trying to play a prank, but not knowing what a prank is. Trying to show sadness.
Was an Orville episode. Was Isaac on Orville?
Yeah, except Isaac is actually a robot and doesn't have... Right, yeah. It's very in the line of Data where they said, he'll be trying to figure out humor and laughter and anger and fear. Yeah. He just won't be good at it.
Right.
And then...
I guess it makes sense.
He was set by the Vulcan Science Academy to replace Spock specifically. Again, in canon, there's Vulcans serving throughout Starfleet, so this is a weird premise that didn't last. Yeah. And he is only 22 years old, so super young and super, super smart. Decker was the other half of Spock. He's the new first officer. He is the son of Matt Decker, who we saw in the Doomsday Machine, though that is not in the Bible, but it does say in the Bible he's... comes from a Starfleet family. His father and his grandfather and whatever. And the reason they brought him in was Shatner was expensive, and they weren't sure they were going to want to keep paying him. So let's bring in this possible replacement, and then we can hold it over Shatner with any negotiating that hey, Decker could be captain,
which essentially is part of the motion picture.
Yeah, he is captain.
Yeah, You're right. Yeah.
And then they could have that out that we could use Shatner for some episodes as an admiral. So he was there just to hold that over Shatner, essentially.
Wow.
But they were going to have a very close father-son relationship. He was very smart. He would command landing parties. He was essentially Riker.
Yeah.
In the Next Generation. Yep. And our third main character, who was essentially another Next Generation character, was Ilea, or Ilea. Yeah. I don't know.
I think it's Ilea.
Ilea.
I think it's Ilea.
I've seen it. They wrote out pronunciations a couple different ways in here. But it's, in here it says Ilea, which is not how they pronounce it on screen. Yeah. In the Bible, that's how they wrote it. But she's a Delton. She's the bald girl we saw in the motion picture.
Yeah, this was the first time I realized that Persis Khambatta was involved that early on.
Yeah, she was, her and Zahn were both, and Decker. Well, Decker wasn't cast yet, but Persis Khambatta and David Gerard.
Gautreaux?
David Gautreaux? I don't know. Whatever. They were both cast for Star Trek Phase 2 as Ilea and Zahn. And she would be kind of sort of empathic, but not as much as Troy was. She could sense images. And very sex-oriented culture. Everything in their species was about sex. Yeah. And she had to tone it down. Which, I mean, in the 70s, they could get away with more on television than the 60s, but I still feel like that would be difficult.
It would have been a lot of, in Wink of an Eye, when Kirk's putting his boots back on, they still would have had to do some of those kind of shenanigans.
Sure. A lot of the early drafts of the motion picture had Shatner and Ilea kind of having a little love story, and Shatner argued for a love scene between them, where you can at least see it get started and then cut. And Gene Roddenberry said, I think this is a good idea. Can we get into the script? Clearly did not happen.
As a Persis Khambatta fan, rest in peace. I would have loved to see more of her. She was gorgeous. But
well, she, interestingly, she took Chekhov's station, the Navigator, but they did talk about making her more of a counselor. And she had the romantic history with Decker.
Right.
So, again, Riker Troy, the Imzadi stuff. And that part did make it into the film. The other cool thing is they wanted the view screen to go holographic, which we've seen in Discovery and with other stuff. But anyway, because some other things, let's talk about this Bible a little bit more, because there's some cool things. They talk about what's changed. This is the second 5-year mission. The Enterprise has been completely refitted. Captain Kirk has refused an Admiral's star and has managed to get many of his original crew to sign on for another tour, except Spock, who's returned to head the Science Academy on Vulcan. The crew are legends in their own time. So they want to volunteer for another deep space mission, basically because it's getting annoying that everywhere they go, they're just mobbed by people because they're the celebrities. Yeah. They're Beyoncés or whatever. We talked about the new characters. They did say dialogue would get more sophisticated. No old ponderous dialogue patterns. They said, thanks to MASH, we can use more realism. Fragmented sentences, overlaps, and interruptions.
Oh, okay.
Were part of the plan.
Huh.
They said the Enterprise would be designed to be less battleship and more artsy. The guy had a lot of plants, more habitable.
Yeah.
And the key parts of a Star Trek story, our stories are about people who act believably.
Okay.
It has to be an optimistic projection of the future. The story point of view is the captain and the crew. Our regulars are heroes, and our home base is the Enterprise.
Okay.
Very similar to the original series, but I think I kind of get the impression the stories might be a little sophisticated. It's almost, some of the stuff reads like Next Gen as well. Yeah. So I think, I don't know, when we get to the end of this podcast, we'll talk about what we think about how this will do. But yeah, they used so much of this phase too. Anyway, getting back to the timeline. August 1977, Roddenberry pitched In Thy Image as the pilot.
Okay.
That was sort of the God thing, but completely redesigned, and Alan Dean Foster wrote it in Roddenberry's version, the novelist. Eisner loved it, said, this is so good it should be a feature film. Paramount at this time was also having trouble finding advertisers, and they wanted to salvage what they'd spent. They'd already started building sets, they started to hire the scripts. This is where the story gets really, really weird, though. So Paramount is considering pitching this as a TV movie to one of the networks, then decide they want to go for it as a full movie.
Right.
Because they think it big screen. But they were worried about negotiations with everybody involved. They kept the series in production instead, figuring whatever we do, it's going to be able to use it down the road. So they went ahead and built the bridge, they built the new engineering, they did the costumes, but they also went ahead and let the writers write 13 scripts.
Yeah, that was another amazing part. There's so many amazing parts of this, but
and it was weird. The writers were having issues with that because normally they get to see things already being filmed, and they can play off the characters and stuff. The characters did not have, because they hadn't seen the new characters. The writers were really struggling to write these characters, which I understand why they'd have trouble writing. So they kept everything in production. But they were still trying with the goal of, let's get this first script film quality. At the same time, by October here, this was August, they ordered the In Thy Image. Between August and October, Paramount kind of decided, okay, we're getting the movie. So instead of telling everybody, they just kept the cast under contract, and they removed all the writers' deadlines. So all the writers were like, oh, we still have to finish in these 2 weeks. They're like, nah, you can take a couple months. So they're like, okay. But they did. They all got finished. They even, up till December, were replacing the one script didn't get done. So they had John Povil as one of his last acts assigned somebody else to rewrite the script. Construction on the sets was well underway, but halted. They'd already done screen tests with Zahn and Leah. And then people were starting to notice. But, the actor who played Zahn was like, well, I'm guaranteed 13 episodes, pay or play. I have a 6-year contract. And interestingly, he almost didn't get cast because they were going to do the love story that happened between Chapel and Spock. They decided to extend that with Zahn. Yeah. And Majel Barrett was like, he's 22. Right. He's a little young for me. But they were like, whatever. We're going to do it. Then in November, Harold Livingston had done a first draft of In Thy Image based on Alan Foster and Gene Roddenberry's idea. The studio wasn't too happy. They said it was too slow, too much talking about philosophy. It needed more action. So Gene Roddenberry gets to write a draft, and they're like, no, this is awful. It's all talking, no action. So then they started having other people do rewrites. They did decide Decker would die at the end, but we're going to keep Zahn and Ilea, because at that point they're like, okay, Shatner's safe. Then they decided to kill both of them too. The other, even though they didn't tell any of the writers this, so this whole time all 13 scripts are being developed with these 3 new characters in them. But then by December, they kind of had to start slipping, because Eisner doubled the budget. They had to seek out special effects, because they're like, the models we built of the Enterprise and the spaceships aren't going to work for the big screen. But we really like their work, so they did a bunch of the props for the motion picture, that same house. But they started looking for a big studio that could do like Star Wars and Close Encounters level special effects. They also decided the director, Robert Collins, would need to be replaced because he'd only done television and they wanted somebody to film.
Oh, yeah.
So then, by January 1978, this was only like 5 months after ordering this thing to series, they decided full speed ahead, we're going to be okay with letting it come out as a movie. They hired Jeffrey Katzenberg to direct. That ended up not working out, but he came in board. His first task was, you need to go get Nimoy because we're going feature film and we need Nimoy. So Nimoy was starring in Equus at the time.
Wow.
On stage. And he went to Nimoy and they said Nimoy agreed with a lot of money that he'd come back and do one film. One film only. And then Eisner tripled the budget from the already doubled amount. So it was originally like $5 million, then it became like $10 million, then $15 million, then he made $44 million. Because they just were like, we gotta make a big budget sci-fi epic.
Yeah.
And then they hired Robert Wise to direct, who would eventually direct. At the same time, they weren't happy with how the script was shaping out, so they kept bringing back Harold Livingston, who walked out and quit 4 separate times. And then he finally was like, if you let me write the next script, whatever I want, I'll finish Star Trek.
Because he and Roddenberry were tight, and then they ended up
yeah. And so his deal was, you have to let me write whatever movie I want after this, my own idea, and I'm never working with Gene Roddenberry again for his 2 demands. So then we get the film. David Giroux did end up playing a Starfleet officer, Commander Branch, on the space station was destroyed, which I had misremembered. I thought he played Zahn.
Is that right off the top?
Yes, right at the beginning.
Yeah.
The actor who played Zahn played a different part. Zahn does not exactly appear, but we see the new Vulcan first officer / science officer, played by somebody else, John Rashad Kamal, who only has a couple credits, and they renamed him Commander Sonak, and he still died right off the bat in the first scene, transporter accident.
Oh yeah.
Which I thought was Zahn, but apparently it was a different actor and character. And then of course Leon Decker died at the end of the film, so we basically reset for Wrath of Khan back to what the original series was. Those are all my notes on here, but given that a lot of this got used for the motion picture, given that a lot of the rest of it, including some stuff that was in the motion picture, got used for Next Generation.
Yeah.
What do you think? Do you think this would have been a good series?
It's funny. It's hard to, when you hear all the acrimony and the fighting backstage, like, it couldn't have worked. But that happens in a lot of successful things.
Well, okay, so my, not counter-argument, but the elaboration on that, that 50-year mission, 2-book volume set I have, the whole history of Star Trek, the first 50 years, they go into the early seasons of Next Gen, and
right.
And it was a total mess.
Yeah.
I feel like Phase 2 would have started like Next Gen, but without replacing the cast.
Yeah.
Would it have worked?
It would have been a hit.
I think there's ample evidence that it would have been a hit at first.
Yeah, it would have been a hit. I don't know if it would have...
Would Star Trek have died then? Would that have been it?
That's a good question.
I think it could very well have been a hit for a couple seasons. Yeah. Actually, I think it's likely it would have run longer than 3, because I think by then the writers are getting better. They had a more concise view of what it was. As much as Roddenberry has issues, season 3 without him was the worst.
Right. Well, and then like we kind of started with the demos, but still would have probably been pretty good.
Yes, so that's why I'm thinking it could have lasted more than 3 seasons.
Star Trek fans beget Star Wars fans. Star Wars beget Star Trek. More Star Trek fans. Just the sci-fi thing was coalescing right at that point.
Well, so you still had to hide your nerddom, but having these things come out gave them something big to go after. Mm-hmm. I mean, Wrath of Khan, for years, for adjusted to inflation, held the biggest box office opening.
Yeah, it was
of like any film.
Because you had a built-in core that was going to show up.
And Star Wars was huge. Mm-hmm. And Empire and Return of Jedi were big.
The year Wrath of Khan came out, you had E.T. and 5 or 6 other giant movies. So many great sci-fi movies that movies like Blade Runner tanked. Yeah, it didn't do well, and obviously we know now. Long term, it's a cult movie, a cult classic, and a classic film, but still didn't make a ton of money. So much that they threw a ton of money into a sequel that also didn't make a lot of money. But that's a different conversation podcast altogether. I think it would have been a hit. I think it would have done okay. I still feel like, in my mind, at some point, the networks would have been like, they would have either started cutting corners or, not exactly like in the 60s, but still the 70s at some point.
Oh, they were definitely the same battles.
They just started cutting corners, and I think I get hung up like you just said, with Roddenberry, it's like, God, he gets in the way. But on the other hand, if he's not around, if you have a Freddy Freiberger, then it's crap too.
I mean, he developed Next Gen, which was super successful.
Yeah.
Granted, it didn't become super successful until he stepped back.
Right.
But
right.
It's impossible to know for sure. But I feel like if Star Trek had been given the second chance on television, fans would have appreciated it. It would have been big for them. But it then would have gone away. Because they tried it again, they did. Whereas making him in the movies, they kept it so rare that it kept the fans excited.
Yep.
And then 10 years later, when it finally went back to television, Next Gen was so different. The old fans came, but it also sparked a whole new generation that probably wouldn't have happened in the 70s.
And original animated. Then you got all the novels and everything still going on. The conventions going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think to your point, I think there is something to that. Then I think, like we were just talking about, the nerd culture or just culture in general just shifted enough that when Next Gen shows up, it's huge right off the bat. And not just the Trek people, just everybody. And then you keep going, and all of a sudden you got more Trek here, there, everywhere.
But yeah, I think for Star Trek to hit the way it hit, a lot of it was the right thing at the right time in the right order.
Yeah.
And as much as I really would like to see Phase 2, and I feel like this is the alternate episode of this episode of the podcast, Phase 2 gets made.
It happens, yeah.
But as much as I think Phase 2 was interesting and had some cool things, I'm kind of glad it didn't come together.
Yeah, it makes me. It would have made me. At the time, it would have made me nervous. I would have just been so happy that it was on.
But the films are so good, and trying to do 24 episodes of them.
Yeah, and
Next Gen, they expanded the concept and developed it more.
Yeah, and we'll get into it more when we get to the motion picture very soon.
Very, very soon. Next week, we'll be talking the motion picture.
Because there are people that have a lot of problems with the motion picture, and I think they might have had those same issues with the series. Maybe not. Like I said, we'll get more into it. There was so much pressure on that motion picture to be all things to all people.
Yeah.
So there might have been less pressure on the series, but I don't know if it would have had the same oomph, for lack of a better term, of Star Trek's it's back. It's just as big as Star Wars and all these other properties. It can and people talk about the motion picture failing and everything. It didn't really fail. It just didn't have the numbers that.
I mean, it got enough to get a sequel.
Yeah, which.
And the sequel did great.
It killed.
Sequel was
And I think that's another one of those where it's like, well, I don't know if another one's going to work. It's like, no, that crowd's still there. And
I did think with Nimoy out of the way, though, my impression is they were going to split the story more. Like, still Shatner the lead.
Right.
But everybody else would get more.
Right.
And granted, you had more characters, because Chapel was getting beefed up. Rand was back, and you had these three
Ilea and Decker and
and Zahn, spelled XON.
Well, and we talked about it in the animated, and especially season 3.
Maress and Eric.
So much started focusing on Spock.
Yeah.
To the detriment of others. What could have been?
I guess Ilea's our woman of Phase 2. Well, she's a main character, but we don't really have a choice.
That's a good point.
But we don't really have a choice.
Persis Kambata,
I give you Dr. Chapel if you want.
I will go with Persis Kambata. Yeah, I loved her.
Yeah, no, she was great. It does make me a little sad we didn't get to see her. Stephen Collins obviously went on to do Seventh Heaven.
Yep.
Who eventually was cast as Decker, and then all the bad stuff about him came out. Now no career.
I saw him in All the President's Men just last week. I forgot he was in there. Yeah.
Yeah, and his Seventh Heaven wife, Catherine, what's her name? Was in Star Trek 4.
Yes.
So we'll get to
Catherine
that.
Catherine Hicks.
Catherine Hicks, yeah. Was in Star Trek 4, so
That's
we'll get
right.
to that as well.
Yeah.
A lot of great actors in these films. I like Phase 2. I think, like I said, read this book. Read Star Trek Phase 2.
It's a fascinating missing chapter. Like I said, just reading the Wikipedia account, I was like, this is amazing. I didn't realize how much went on.
How many television shows don't get a whole book like this?
Not very
20
many.
years later. This franchise just has so many untold stories, and this to me is probably the least understood chapter of the saga.
Yeah. And like we talked about, its remnants lived on.
Yeah, and for those that feel that Star Trek was gone for the better part of a decade, this proves it wasn't gone.
Yeah.
They were still working.
Yeah.
But next week we'll talk the motion picture. We want to rank Phase 2 on a scale of series not made. I think it's the best one.
It's the best one. It's the best.
Until next time.
Live long.
Prosper. It's All Been Done presents.
Who's Got the Time?